"Would you like to have dinner with us?" asks a poor girl to a lonely man, not knowing he was a millionaire with a terminal illness and that it would be his last Christmas. Before we start, I love seeing this community grow. Feel free to introduce yourself below. The bitter December wind cut through downtown Millfield, Ohio like a knife, sending newspaper scraps dancing across the empty parking lot of Murphy's Grocery. Most folks were home by now, warm kitchens filled with the smell of Christmas Eve dinner and children's laughter echoing through brightly lit houses. But not everyone had somewhere warm to go. William Harrison pulled his wool coat tighter as he walked toward his black Mercedes, the only car left in the lot. At 67, Bill had everything money could buy. A mansion overlooking the lake, more investments than he could count, and a business empire that had made him one of Ohio's wealthiest men. Yet tonight, like every night for the past 5 years, he was going home to an empty house. He'd just bought groceries for one. Again, a frozen dinner, some milk, bread that would go stale before he finished it. The cashier had wished him a Merry Christmas with pity in her eyes, and he'd managed a weak smile in return as he fumbled with his car keys. A small voice cut through the howling wind. "Excuse me, mister?" Bill turned to see a girl, maybe 12 years old, standing by the grocery store entrance. Her jacket was too thin for the weather, and her sneakers had holes that let the snow seep through. She had bright blue eyes and strawberry blonde hair that caught the streetlight. But what struck him most was her smile, genuine and warm despite the cold. "Yes, dear?" Bill's voice was gentler than it had been in months. The girl shifted nervously, glancing back toward the shadows near the store, where Bill could make out 2 more figures, a woman and a smaller child, both huddled together for warmth. "My mom's kinda embarrassed to ask, but—" Sarah Mitchell took a deep breath, her words forming small clouds in the frigid air. "We're having Christmas dinner tomorrow, and we noticed you eating alone at the diner yesterday. Would you like to join us?" Bill's heart stopped. In all his years of wealth and success, no one had ever invited him anywhere out of simple kindness. Business dinners, charity galas, social obligations, yes. But a genuine invitation from a child who had nothing to gain? Never. "I don't want to impose," he managed, his voice thick with unexpected emotion. "You wouldn't be." Sarah's face lit up. "Mom always makes too much food anyway. And my little brother Tommy loves meeting new people. We don't have much, but—" She paused, then added with the wisdom of someone far older than her years, "Sometimes company is the best gift of all." Bill looked past her to the woman, clearly the mother, who was watching nervously. Even from a distance, he could see the exhaustion in her posture, the way she held the younger child protectively. They were struggling. That much was obvious. Their clothes were clean but worn, and the woman's face had the gaunt look of someone who'd been skipping meals to feed her children. Something stirred in Bill's chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose, maybe, or hope. "What time should I be there?" he asked, Sarah's whole face transformed with joy. "Really? You'll come?" "I'd be honored." She quickly gave him directions to Sunset Mobile Home Park, Unit 47. "Around 2 o'clock? Mom starts cooking early." As Bill drove away, his hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel, he caught sight of Sarah running back to her family, clearly excited to share the news. Through his rearview mirror, he watched the small family huddled together again, and for the first time in years, William Harrison smiled a real smile. He had no idea this would be his last Christmas, but something told him it might just be his best. Christmas morning arrived with a fresh blanket of snow that made even Sunset Mobile Home Park look magical. Bill had barely slept, partly from excitement and partly from the persistent pain in his abdomen that he'd been ignoring for weeks. He'd convinced himself it was just stress, just the loneliness eating away at him from the inside. At exactly 2 o'clock, he stood outside Unit 47, holding a bag of groceries he'd picked up that morning. Nothing too fancy. He didn't want to overwhelm them. Just some cranberry sauce, dinner rolls, and a small toy truck he'd grabbed for the little boy. Before he could knock, the door swung open to reveal Sarah, now wearing a red Christmas sweater that was clearly homemade. Her face was flushed with excitement. "Mom, he's here! The nice man is here!" Emma Mitchell appeared behind her daughter, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was younger than Bill had expected, maybe mid-30s, with tired green eyes, but a warm smile that reminded him of Sarah's. Despite the weariness, there was a strength about her that spoke of years of fighting to keep her family together. "Please come in," Emma said, stepping aside. "I'm Emma, and this whirlwind is Sarah. I can't thank you enough for accepting our invitation." The trailer was small, but spotlessly clean, decorated with handmade Christmas ornaments and paper snowflakes. A tiny artificial tree sat in the corner, surrounded by a few wrapped presents that looked like they'd been carefully saved for throughout the year. The smell of roasting chicken filled the air, mixed with cinnamon and something else, the scent of a home filled with love. "Tommy," Sarah called, "come meet our friend." An 8-year-old boy emerged from the back bedroom, shy but curious. He had the same strawberry blonde hair as his sister and was clutching a well-worn stuffed dinosaur. "This is Mr." Emma paused, realizing she'd never gotten his name. "Harrison," Bill supplied, "but please call me Bill." "Mr. Bill," Tommy said solemnly, "do you like dinosaurs?" Bill knelt down to the boy's level, despite the pain it caused in his joints. "I love dinosaurs. What kind is that one?" "It's a T-Rex named Rexy. Sarah says he's supposed to be scary, but I think he's just lonely." The words hit Bill like a physical blow. Just lonely. How accurately this 8-year-old had summed up not just his toy, but Bill's entire existence. "Maybe Rexy just needs some friends," Bill said gently. Tommy's face brightened. "Maybe. Do you want to be his friend?" "I'd be honored." Emma watched this interaction with surprise. Most adults either ignored Tommy or talked down to him. But this well-dressed stranger was treating her son with genuine respect and interest. As they gathered around the small table, Bill was amazed by what Emma had accomplished with so little. The chicken was perfectly seasoned, the mashed potatoes fluffy despite being made from a box, and the green beans were fresh, probably bought with careful budgeting and sacrifice. "Would you like to say grace, Mr. Bill?" Emma asked. Bill hadn't prayed in years, hadn't even thought about God since his wife died. But looking around this table, at these 3 people who had welcomed him with open hearts, despite having every reason to be suspicious of strangers, he felt moved to try. "Dear Lord," he began, his voice rusty with disuse, "thank you for this beautiful family who showed kindness to a stranger. Thank you for this meal prepared with love. And thank you for reminding me that the greatest gifts can't be bought with money." When he opened his eyes, Emma was wiping away tears. "That was beautiful," she whispered. As they ate, Bill learned their story in pieces. Emma had been on her own since Tommy was 2, working multiple jobs to keep them afloat. Sarah was incredibly bright, maintaining straight A's despite helping care for Tommy and doing household chores that most 12-year-olds never had to think about. "What do you do for work?" Emma asked politely. "I'm retired," Bill said simply, not wanting to burden them with talk of wealth when they clearly had so little. "I worked in business for many years." "That's nice," Sarah said. "Mom works at the diner and cleans offices at night. She works really hard." Emma blushed. "Sarah, it's true. You're the hardest working person I know." Bill watched this exchange, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. These children saw their mother as a hero, and she was. Emma Mitchell was doing everything right, with almost nothing to work with. After dinner, they played board games around the coffee table. Bill found himself laughing, actually laughing for the first time in years as Tommy made silly voices for his game pieces, and Sarah demonstrated her surprisingly strategic mind. As evening approached, Bill knew he had to leave, but something had changed inside him. The emptiness that had defined his life for so long felt smaller, pushed back by the warmth of this family's acceptance. "Thank you," he said to Emma as Sarah and Tommy hugged him goodbye. "This has been the best Christmas I've had in years." "Thank you for coming," Emma replied. "The kids loved having you here, I hope. Well, I hope you'll visit again sometime." As Bill walked to his car, Sarah called out, "Mr. Bill, will you come back soon?" He turned back, seeing all three of them framed in the doorway, light spilling out around them into the dark night. "I'd like that very much," he said. And for the first time in 5 years, William Harrison went home feeling like he belonged somewhere. 3 days after Christmas, Bill found himself driving back towards Sunset Mobile Home Park. He told himself he was just checking on them, making sure they were okay after the holidays. But the truth was simpler and more complex than that. He couldn't stop thinking about the warmth he'd felt at their table, the way Sarah had looked at him without judgment, how Tommy had shared his dinosaur stories with such trust. The pain in his abdomen had been getting worse, sharp stabs that took his breath away when he thought no one was looking. He'd made an appointment with Dr. Chen for next week, but he pushed those thoughts aside as he pulled up to Unit 47. Sarah was outside, building a snowman with Tommy despite the cold. When she saw his car, her face lit up like Christmas morning all over again. "Mr. Bill!" "You came back." Emma appeared in the doorway, looking surprised but pleased. She was wearing scrubs, probably getting ready for her shift at the diner. "I hope I'm not intruding," Bill said as the children ran to greet him. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." It was a lie, and Emma seemed to know it, but she smiled anyway. "Of course not. Kids, let Mr. Bill warm up inside. I have to leave for work in a few minutes." "Can Mr. Bill help us finish our snowman?" Tommy asked, tugging on Bill's coat. "If he wants to," Emma said, checking her watch. "But don't keep him out in the cold too long." Bill found himself on his knees in the snow, helping Tommy and Sarah roll the perfect head for their creation. His expensive wool coat would probably be ruined, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd cared so little about something so expensive. "He needs a carrot nose," Sarah declared. "And rocks for eyes," Tommy added. "But the good kind of rocks, not the mean ones." "There are mean rocks?" Bill asked, genuinely curious. "Oh yes," Tommy said seriously. "The pointy ones that hurt when you step on them. But smooth rocks are nice. They just want to be helpful." Bill was struck again by this child's simple wisdom, his ability to see personality and intention in everything around him. When had he lost that kind of wonder? After Emma left for work, Bill found himself naturally settling into helping with homework and preparing dinner. Sarah was working on a book report about Bridge to Terabithia, and Tommy was practicing his letters, his tongue sticking out in concentration. "Is this word right?" Tommy asked, showing Bill a paper covered in careful crayon letters. Bill looked at the page where Tommy had written "friend" in large, shaky letters. "Almost perfect," Bill said gently. "Friend has an I in it, Friend. But the most important part is that you know what it means. It means someone who likes you, even when you're sad." Tommy said matter-of-factly. Bill's throat tightened. "That's exactly right, buddy." As the evening wore on, Bill learned more about their daily routine. Sarah helped Tommy with his bath, while Bill cleaned up the dinner dishes. It was a simple evening, the kind most people took for granted, but for Bill it felt like a revelation. When Emma returned from work, exhausted and smelling faintly of French fries and coffee, she found Bill reading "Good Night Moon" to Tommy, while Sarah did math homework at the kitchen table. "You didn't have to stay," she said, but there was gratitude in her voice. "I wanted to," Bill replied honestly. "They're wonderful children, Emma. You should be proud." "I am." She sank into a chair, looking older than her 34 years. Some days I wonder if I'm enough for them, though. They deserve so much more than I can give them." Bill looked at Sarah, who was patiently explaining a math problem to herself, and Tommy, who was fighting sleep as he listened to the familiar story. They were happy, loved, secure in ways that had nothing to do with money. "They have everything they need," he said quietly. "They have you." Something passed between Emma and Bill in that moment, an understanding that went beyond words. She saw his loneliness, and he saw her exhaustion. And somehow both burdens felt lighter for being acknowledged. As Bill prepared to leave, Tommy ran up and hugged his legs tightly. "Will you come back tomorrow?" the boy asked. Bill looked at Emma, who nodded slightly. "If it's okay with your mum, I'd like that very much." Outside, as he walked to his car, Bill felt the sharp pain in his abdomen again, more intense this time. He gripped the car door, waiting for it to pass, and found himself thinking about Dr. Chen's appointment. But looking back at the warm light spilling from Unit 47, hearing the faint sounds of a family settling in for the night, Bill realized that whatever was wrong with him seemed less important than what was finally going right. For the first time in 5 years, he had somewhere to be tomorrow. For the first time in 5 years, someone would miss him if he didn't show up. That night, alone in his sprawling mansion overlooking Lake Erie, Bill walked through rooms filled with expensive furniture that had never truly felt like home. The silence was deafening after the comfortable chatter of Unit 47, and for the first time, he allowed himself to truly see what his life had become. He'd built Harrison Industries from nothing, turning a small software company into a technology empire worth hundreds of millions. For 40 years, he'd lived for the next deal, the next acquisition, the next triumph. Even after his wife Margaret died 5 years ago, he'd thrown himself into work, using it to numb the grief that threatened to swallow him whole. Margaret. Even now, her absence felt like a physical wound. They'd met in college, married young, and spent 38 years building a life together. She'd been the warm heart of their home, the one who remembered birthdays and hosted dinner parties and made their house feel alive. They'd tried for children for years, enduring disappointment after disappointment until the doctors finally said it wouldn't happen. Margaret had grieved quietly, privately, while Bill had buried himself even deeper in work. They'd talked about adoption, but somehow the years had slipped away, and before they knew it, they were in their 50s, set in their ways, convincing themselves they were content with just each other. Now, wandering through rooms Margaret had decorated with such care, Bill understood what a fool he'd been. All those missed dinners, all those business trips that could have been delayed, all those moments he'd chosen profit over presents. What had any of it mattered now? He paused in Margaret's sitting room, where her reading chair still held the book she'd been reading the night she died. A heart attack, sudden and merciless, while he was in Chicago closing a deal. He'd flown home to find her there, peaceful but gone, and the weight of all his absences had nearly destroyed him. After the funeral, and colleagues had suggested he sell the house, start fresh somewhere new. But Bill couldn't bring himself to leave. This mausoleum of memories was his penance, his reminder of everything he'd lost through his own choices. The pain hit him again, doubling him over as he gripped the back of Margaret's chair. It was getting worse, happening more frequently, and tomorrow's appointment with Dr. Chen couldn't come soon enough. Part of him was terrified of what the doctor might find, but a larger part was simply tired. Tired of being alone, tired of existing without purpose, tired of a life that felt more like an elaborate form of dying. But today, for the first time in years, he'd felt alive again. Sarah's laugh, Tommy's innocent questions, Emma's quiet strength. They'd awakened something in him he'd thought was dead forever. The way Tommy had looked at him with complete trust, the way Sarah had naturally included him in their world, the way Emma had let him help without making him feel like an intruder. It was more precious than all his accumulated wealth. He thought about Margaret, wondered what she would have thought of the Mitchell family. She would have loved them, he realized. Margaret had always been drawn to genuine people, had always been able to see past surfaces to the heart underneath. She would have been delighted by Tommy's dinosaur stories, and impressed by Sarah's intelligence, and moved by Emma's dedication to her children. "What do I do, Maggie?" he whispered to the empty room. "How do I make the time I have left matter?" The silence offered no answers. But as Bill finally made his way to bed, he found himself thinking about tomorrow, about Sarah's book report and Tommy's letter practice, and Emma's tired smile when she came home from work. Small things, ordinary things, but they felt more important than any business deal he'd ever closed. He'd spent 5 years grieving the past and ignoring the future, but maybe if he was lucky, if these wonderful people would let him, he could spend whatever time he had left learning how to truly live. The pain struck again as he reached for his medication, and Bill closed his eyes, pushing down the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. Not yet. He found himself praying to a God he'd ignored for too long. Not yet. Give me a little more time with them. Let me matter to someone again before it's too late. Outside his window, snow continued to fall on the lake, and somewhere across town, 3 people who barely knew him were sleeping peacefully, unaware that they'd already begun to save a lonely man's life. Tomorrow, Bill would learn exactly how much time he had left. But tonight, for the first time in years, he had something to live for. Dr. Marcus Chen had been William Harrison's physician for 15 years, and he'd never seen the man look so frail. Bill sat on the examination table in a hospital gown that made him appear smaller, older, more vulnerable than the powerful businessman who usually strode into his office in perfectly tailored suits. "The blood work confirms what the CT scan showed," Dr. Chen said gently, pulling up a chair to sit at eye level with his patient. "Bill, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you have pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Bill had prepared himself for bad news, but the word still hit him like a physical blow. "How long?" "With treatment, maybe 8 to 10 months. Without." Dr. Chen paused, his expression carefully neutral. 3 to 6 months, possibly less. The room seemed to spin around Bill as he processed this information. 3 to 6 months. He thought of Tommy's eager face, Sarah's bright smile, Emma's quiet strength. He'd just found them, just discovered what it felt like to belong somewhere again. And now, what would treatment involve? He asked, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, if we can shrink the tumor enough. But I have to be honest with you. Pancreatic cancer at this stage is aggressive. Treatment might give you more time, but it would be time spent feeling sick, weak in and out of hospitals. Bill closed his eyes, thinking of Margaret's last months. She'd fought brain cancer with every ounce of strength she had, enduring treatments that left her barely recognizable, clinging to life with desperate determination. In the end, the disease had won anyway, but not before stealing her dignity, her joy, everything that had made her herself. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Bill..." Dr. Chen leaned forward, his voice dropping to the tone he reserved for the hardest conversations. "Is there anyone you'd like me to call? Family? Friends? This isn't something you should face alone." Bill almost laughed at the irony. Until a week ago, the answer would have been a resounding no. He had distant cousins he hadn't spoken to in years, business associates who would send expensive flowers and then forget about him, a staff who would mourn appropriately and move on. But now there was a 12-year-old girl who asked about dinosaurs and helped with homework. An 8-year-old boy who saw personality in rocks and trusted strangers with innocent faith, and a 34-year-old woman who worked herself to exhaustion to provide for her children and still found room in her heart to invite a lonely old man to dinner. There might be, he said quietly. I'll let you know. Lee, the drive from the medical center back to Sunset Mobile Home Park, felt like traveling between two different worlds. In one, he was William Harrison, wealthy businessman, facing a terminal diagnosis with the cold efficiency that had characterized most of his adult life. In the other, he was Mr. Bill, friend to dinosaurs and helper with homework. Someone who mattered not for what he owned, but for who he was becoming. When he arrived at Unit 47, Sarah was outside again, this time helping Tommy build what appeared to be a snow fort. Their faces lit up when they saw him, and Bill felt his heart clench with the terrible knowledge of what he now carried. "Mr. Bill," Tommy called, "look! We're making a castle for Rexy." Bill knelt beside them, grateful for the distraction of their project. "That's the finest dinosaur castle I've ever seen," he said, helping them pack snow into the walls. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, studying his face with the intuitive awareness that some children possessed. "You look sad." Bill forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetheart. Doctor's appointments can be exhausting." Emma emerged from the trailer, already dressed for her evening shift at the diner. She took one look at Bill and immediately crossed to him, her expression concerned. "Everything all right?" she asked quietly. "Fine," Bill lied, hating how easily the deception came. "Just routine checkup stuff." But Emma's eyes lingered on his face, and Bill realized that lying to her felt wrong in a way that lying to business associates never had. This woman had welcomed him into her family's life with open arms, and he was already keeping secrets from her. As Emma left for work and the children settled into their evening routine, Bill found himself memorizing details he'd never paid attention to before. The way Tommy hummed while he colored, completely absorbed in his task. The careful way Sarah organized her school supplies, already showing the responsibility that poverty had forced on her too young. The faint scent of vanilla candles that Emma used to make the small space feel more like home. "Mr. Bill," Tommy said, climbing into his lap with his dinosaur book, "will you read about the long-neck ones tonight?" Bill pulled the boy closer, feeling the solid weight of him, breathing in the sweet scent of children's shampoo and innocence. "Of course, buddy. Which one should we start with?" As he read about brontosauruses and their peaceful lives in ancient forests, Bill made a decision. Whatever time he had left, 3 months, 6 months, maybe more if he was lucky. He wouldn't spend it in hospital beds feeling sorry for himself. He would spend it here, with this family who had shown him what love looked like when it wasn't complicated by money or expectations or the weight of past mistakes. He would spend it learning how to be the man Margaret had always believed he could be. He would spend it making sure that when his time came, 3 people who had barely known him would remember him not as a wealthy stranger, but as someone who had truly mattered in their lives. The only question now was how much of the truth he could bear to tell them, and when. 2 weeks into January, weeks into, Bill had fallen into a routine that felt more natural than anything had in years. He arrived at Unit 47 each afternoon, helped with homework, played with the children, and stayed for dinner. Emma had stopped protesting his contributions to their meals, accepting his grocery offerings with grace that came from understanding how much he needed to feel useful. What she didn't know was that each bag of groceries, each small gift for the children, each time he quietly paid their overdue electric bill or slipped money into her coat pocket, was being carefully documented by his lawyer. Bill had begun the delicate process of restructuring his will and estate, creating a trust that would provide for the Mitchell family without overwhelming them. But tonight, something was different. Emma was quiet during dinner, distracted in a way that had both children shooting worried glances in her direction. "Mom?" Sarah asked as they cleared the table. "Is everything okay?" Emma forced a smile. "Everything's fine, honey. Why don't you help Tommy with his bath while I talk to Mr. Bill?" When the children were out of earshot, Emma sank into a chair and buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want them to see me like this." Bill immediately moved to the chair beside her. "What's wrong?" "I lost my job at the diner today." The words came out flat, defeated. "New owner wants to bring in his own people, and the cleaning company called. They're cutting back on office buildings, so those shifts are gone too." Bill felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I have maybe 3 weeks of savings if I'm careful, 3 weeks to find something new, or—" She gestured helplessly around the small trailer that represented everything she'd worked so hard to provide for her children. "There has to be something. In Millfield?" Emma laughed bitterly. "I've been looking for better work for years. There's nothing here that pays enough to support 3 people. I might have to." She stopped, unable to voice the words. "What?" "Move in with my sister in Cleveland. She's offered before, but her apartment is tiny, and the kids would have to change schools, leave their friends." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Sarah's finally settled somewhere, doing well in school, and Tommy's just started to come out of his shell. And now I have to tear their whole world apart because I can't provide for them." Bill watched this woman who had shown him such kindness collapse under the weight of fears he could solve with a single phone call. His fortune was vast enough that he could buy the entire mobile home park without feeling the expense, could set up a trust that would ensure the Mitchell family never worried about money again. But he also understood, with painful clarity, that simply throwing money at the problem wasn't the answer. Emma Mitchell had pride, dignity, and the fierce independence that came from years of fighting to take care of her family alone. If he revealed his wealth now, if he tried to solve everything with checks and charity, he might lose the very thing that had made their friendship so precious. The fact that they cared about him not for what he had, but for who he was. "How much time do you have before you'd need to move?" he asked carefully. "End of February, maybe early March. The rent's paid through then." Bill's mind raced. 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, Emma would have to make a choice that would devastate her children, all because she couldn't find work that paid a living wage in a small town with limited opportunities, unless he could find another way. "Emma," he said slowly, an idea beginning to form. "What if I told you I might know of something? A job opportunity that could work?" She looked up at him with desperate hope. "What kind of job?" Bill thought quickly. He owned dozens of properties, businesses, investments throughout Ohio. Surely there was something, some position that would allow Emma to use her skills while staying in Millfield. Something that wouldn't feel like charity, but would pay enough to support her family. "Let me make some calls," he said. "I have some business contacts who might know of opportunities. Just don't give up yet, okay?" Emma reached over and squeezed his hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve a friend like you." The irony of her words wasn't lost on Bill. She was thanking him for a kindness he hadn't even extended yet. While he was sitting on the resources to solve all her problems and wrestling with how to help without destroying the authenticity of their relationship. From the bathroom came the sound of Tommy giggling and Sarah's patient voice explaining why soap couldn't be used as finger paint. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a family that might be torn apart by economics and circumstances beyond their control. Bill made a silent vow as he listened to those sounds. He would find a way to help that preserved Emma's dignity and kept this family together, and when his time came, which Dr. Chen had reminded him would be sooner rather than later, he would make sure they were secure enough that his absence wouldn't destroy the stability he'd grown to love being part of. He just had to figure out how to be their guardian angel, without revealing that he could afford to buy them wings. The children returned from the bathroom, Tommy in his dinosaur pajamas and Sarah carrying a stack of library books. As they settled into their evening routine of reading and quiet play, Bill watched Emma's face and saw her pushing down her fears for her children's sake. She was the strongest person he'd ever known, and she deserved a miracle. Bill was determined to find a way to give her one. The next morning, Bill sat in his home office, surrounded by financial documents and business contacts, his mind racing with possibilities. The pain in his abdomen had been particularly sharp during the night, and he'd barely slept. But Emma's desperate situation had given him a focus he hadn't felt in months. He pulled up the files for Harrison Industries' local properties and subsidiaries. There had to be something, some way to create a legitimate job opportunity that would keep the Mitchell family in Millfield without making Emma feel like a charity case. Then he found it. Millfield Community Centre had been one of his smaller investments, a property he'd purchased years ago with vague intentions of developing. It sat empty, a beautiful brick building from the 1940s that had once housed the town's library. He'd been paying property taxes on it for 5 years, completely forgotten until now. Bill's fingers flew across his keyboard as an idea took shape. What if he didn't just find Emma a job? What if he created one that would benefit the entire community? By noon, he had a plan. "Robert," he said into his phone, speaking to his longtime business manager, "I need you to fast-track something for me. The Millfield Community Centre project. Sir, I don't show any active project by that name, because I'm creating it now. I want to turn the old library building into a proper community centre. After-school programs, senior activities, family services. We'll need a full-time director to oversee operations, programming and community outreach." There was a pause. "That's quite an undertaking, Mr. Harrison. The renovation costs alone would be substantial, and the ongoing operational expenses—" "Money's not an issue," Bill interrupted. "What matters is timeline. How quickly can we have job postings up and interviews scheduled?" "Well, if you're serious about this, I suppose we could have preliminary positions posted within a week, pending board approval, and consider the board approved. I want this moving fast, Robert. And I want the director position to pay well, $60,000 annually to start, with health benefits and room for growth." Robert's surprise was audible. "For a small-town community centre, that's quite generous. Good people deserve good compensation. Make it happen." After hanging up, Bill drove straight to Unit 47, where he found Emma helping Tommy with a puzzle, while Sarah practiced piano on a small keyboard that had seen better days. "Emma, could I speak with you privately?" he asked. They stepped outside into the cold afternoon air, and Bill chose his words carefully. "I made some calls about job opportunities, and something interesting came up. There's a developer looking to create a community centre here in Millfield. After-school programs, senior services, that sort of thing. They're looking for someone to run it." Emma's eyes lit up cautiously. What kind of qualifications would they need? Someone with experience, managing multiple responsibilities, working with families, understanding community needs. Someone who knows how to stretch a budget and make things work with limited resources. Bill paused. "Someone exactly like you." "Bill, I don't have any formal education in community management, or you've been managing a community of 3 for years, Emma. You know every family in this park. You volunteer at the school. You understand what people need because you've needed it yourself. That's worth more than any degree." Emma was quiet for a long moment, hope and skepticism warring in her expression. When would they be interviewing? Next week. The pay would be $60,000 a year plus benefits. Emma's knees nearly buckled. $60,000? Bill, that's more than I've ever dreamed of making. Are you sure this is real? The desperate hope in her voice nearly broke Bill's heart. He was offering her security, the chance to provide for her children without the constant fear of financial catastrophe, and the knowledge that he was essentially buying her that security with his own money felt both right and terrifying. "It's real," he said simply. "Would you be interested?" "Interested?" Emma laughed, tears starting to fall. "Bill, This could change everything for us. The kids could stay in their school, we could stay in our home, I could actually plan for their future instead of just surviving day to day. Then let's make sure you get the interview. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Emma shared the news with Sarah and Tommy. The children's excitement was infectious, and Bill found himself caught up in their hope, despite knowing that he was orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. "Does this mean we don't have to move to Cleveland?" Sarah asked. "If Mom gets the job, we get to stay right here," Emma confirmed. Tommy clapped his hands. "And Mr. Bill can still come visit us." "Every day, if you'll have me," Bill promised, the words carrying more weight than the boy could possibly understand. Later, after the children were in bed, Emma walked Bill to his car. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You've given us hope when I thought we were out of options." "You gave me something more precious," Bill replied. "You gave me a family." The words hung between them in the cold night air, deeper and more meaningful than either of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Emma reached up and hugged him, and Bill closed his eyes, memorizing the feeling of being truly needed by someone who had no agenda beyond genuine affection. As he drove home, Bill felt a sharp stab of pain that doubled him over at a red light. The cancer was progressing faster than Dr. Chen had predicted, but seeing Emma's hope tonight, knowing that he could secure her family's future, made every moment of discomfort worth it. He had maybe 4 months left if he was lucky. He was going to make every single day count. The interview took place on a snowy Thursday morning at the Harrison Industries downtown office. Bill watched from his executive suite on the 4th floor as Emma walked into the building. Wearing a navy dress she'd borrowed from her neighbor, and carrying a folder with her hastily assembled resume. She looked nervous but determined, and Bill felt a surge of pride mixed with guilt. She had no idea that the 3-person interview panel consisted of his hand-picked employees, or that the job had been created specifically for her. Robert Mitchell, his business manager, conducted the interview with professional thoroughness. Bill had insisted that Emma be evaluated fairly. If she couldn't handle the responsibilities, he'd find another way to help her. But as he listened through the conference room's intercom system, he knew his worries were unfounded. "Tell us about a time you had to manage multiple priorities with limited resources," asked Janet Stevens, the HR director. Emma's response was thoughtful and detailed, drawing on her experience juggling 2 jobs while raising 2 children alone. She spoke about organizing carpools for school events, coordinating with other parents to share childcare, and finding creative ways to stretch their household budget. "What would you see as the biggest challenges facing families in Millfield?" Robert asked. "Lack of affordable childcare," Emma said immediately. "So many parents, especially single mothers, can't work because they can't afford daycare. And our kids need safe places to go after school, somewhere they can get help with homework, participate in activities, just be kids without their parents worrying about what they're doing." She talked about elderly residents who were isolated and lonely, about teenagers who had nowhere to go that wasn't the parking lot behind the gas station. She painted a picture of a community that needed exactly what Bill was proposing to build. "Why do you want this position?" Janet asked finally. Emma was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because I know what it's like to need help and not know where to find it. I know what it's like to watch your children go without because there aren't enough opportunities. If I could be the person who connects families with resources, who creates programs that actually meet people where they are, that would be the most meaningful work I could imagine." Bill closed his eyes, listening to the genuine passion in her voice. She wasn't just answering interview questions, she was describing her calling. An hour later, Robert called Bill's office. "Sir, I have to say, Mrs. Mitchell is exactly what this position needs. Her understanding of community needs is exceptional. And her ideas for programming are both practical and innovative. So you're recommending her for the position. Without hesitation, when would you like us to extend the offer? Today, Bill said. And Robert, start the building renovations immediately. I want this center operational within 2 months. That afternoon, Bill waited at Unit 47 with barely contained excitement. Sarah was at school, Tommy was napping, and when Emma's car pulled into the small driveway, Bill met her at the door. "Well?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Emma's face was radiant with joy and disbelief. "I got it, Bill. I actually got it." She burst into tears then, all the stress and fear of the past months pouring out of her. Bill held her as she sobbed against his shoulder, her relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. $60,000 a year, she whispered against his coat. Health insurance, a chance to actually help people. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's real," Bill assured her, his voice thick with emotion. "You earned this, Emma. They didn't hire you because they felt sorry for you. They hired you because you're exactly what the community needs." When Sarah came home from school and heard the news, she screamed with joy and spun Tommy around the kitchen until they both fell down laughing. The celebration dinner that night was the happiest Bill had experienced since Margaret's death, filled with laughter and plans for the future. But as the evening wound down and Bill prepared to leave, he felt the familiar sharp pain in his abdomen. Stronger than before, he gripped the doorframe, waiting for it to pass, and caught Emma watching him with concerned eyes. "Bill, are you feeling all right? You've seemed tired lately." "Just getting old," he said with a forced smile. "Nothing that a good night's sleep won't cure." But as he drove home through the snowy streets, Bill knew he was running out of time to put all the pieces in place. Emma's job was secured, but there were still so many things he needed to arrange, so many ways he wanted to ensure the Mitchell family's future was protected. He thought about Margaret, wondered if she was somehow guiding these last months of his life, helping him find the family he'd never had the chance to raise with her. The thought brought him comfort, as another wave of pain reminded him that his time was growing short. Tomorrow he would call his lawyer and accelerate the changes to his will. Tonight he would hold on to the memory of Emma's joyful tears and the children's laughter, storing them up against the darkness he knew was coming. By mid-February, the renovations at the Millfield Community Center were proceeding at a pace that impressed even the contractors. Bill visited the site daily, ostensibly as an interested community member, but actually to ensure every detail met his exacting standards. The building was being transformed into something beautiful and functional, a large, multi-purpose room for events and activities, smaller rooms for tutoring and support groups, a commercial kitchen for cooking classes and community meals, and a children's play area that would have made Disney proud. Emma started her position even before the renovations were complete, working from a temporary office space and conducting community outreach to understand what programs people most needed. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Bill watched with pride as she threw herself into the work with the same dedication she'd always shown her children. "The response has been incredible," she told Bill one evening as they watched Tommy and Sarah build with blocks on the living room floor. "We already have 40 kids signed up for after-school programs, and the seniors' lunch program has a waiting list." "You're doing amazing work," Bill said, meaning every word. But even as he celebrated Emma's success, Bill was fighting a losing battle with his own body. The pain was constant now, and he'd lost enough weight that his clothes hung loose. Dr. Chen had called twice to schedule follow-up appointments that Bill kept postponing. He wasn't ready for hospitals and final conversations, not yet. "Mr. Bill," Tommy said, abandoning his blocks to climb into Bill's lap. "Are you sick?" The question caught Bill off guard. "Why do you ask, buddy?" "You look like how Mom looked when she had the flu, all pale and tired." Emma looked up sharply from the paperwork she'd been reviewing. "Tommy's right. Bill, you've lost weight and you seem exhausted. Maybe you should see your doctor again." "I'm fine," Bill said automatically, but he could see the skepticism in Emma's eyes. "Adults always say they're fine when they're not," Sarah observed with 12-year-old wisdom. "Like when Mom said she was fine when she was worried about money, but she wasn't really fine at all." Bill found himself caught between three sets of concerned eyes, and for a moment he almost told them the truth. Almost said that he was dying, that his time with them was measured in weeks rather than months, that every day he spent in their warm kitchen was borrowed time. Instead, he deflected. "I promise I'll see my doctor soon, okay?" Promise, Tommy insisted, holding out his pinky finger. Bill linked their pinkies together, the childish gesture somehow carrying more weight than any business contract he'd ever signed. Promise. That night, alone in his mansion, Bill finally returned Dr. Chen's calls. "The blood work from last month shows significant progression," Dr. Chen said gently. "Bill, I really think we need to discuss treatment options or at least pain management. You're suffering unnecessarily." "How long?" Bill asked bluntly. "At this rate, maybe 8 weeks, possibly less." 8 weeks. Bill closed his eyes, calculating. It was mid-February now. 8 weeks would take him to mid-April. He'd wanted to see one more Christmas with the Mitchell family, but that was clearly impossible. But there was something else he could give them, something that would ensure his memory remained a source of joy rather than grief. "Dr. Chen, I need to ask you about something. If I wanted to organize a celebration, something special for people I care about, how much time do I realistically have before?" "Before you're too sick to enjoy it," Dr. Chen understood immediately. "If you're talking about a significant event, I'd say plan for the next 3 to 4 weeks. After that, the pain and fatigue will likely make it difficult for you to participate fully. Thank you for your honesty. Bill, please consider letting me help you with pain management. There's no reason for you to suffer through this alone." "I'll think about it," Bill said, though they both knew he wouldn't. After hanging up, Bill sat in Margaret's reading chair and began to plan. He couldn't give the Mitchell family Christmas in December, but he could create something even more special, a celebration of their time together, a way to say goodbye without burdening them with the truth until they were strong enough to handle it. He thought about the community center, which would open in 3 weeks. What if the grand opening became more than just a ribbon cutting? What if it became a celebration of everything Emma had accomplished, everything the children had taught him about joy and wonder? What if it became his way of showing them how much they'd meant to him? Without the shadow of his illness hanging over the festivities, Bill reached for his phone and began making calls. If he only had a few weeks left of strength, he was going to use every ounce of it to create a memory that would last the Mitchell family a lifetime, even if he wouldn't be there to share in it for very long. The truth came out on a grey March morning when Bill collapsed in Emma's kitchen. He'd been helping Tommy with his dinosaur project for school, cutting out paper shapes with scissors that suddenly felt impossibly heavy in his hands. The pain that had been building all morning reached a crescendo, and the world tilted sideways as he hit the linoleum floor. When he came to, Emma was kneeling beside him, her face pale with fear, while Sarah held a crying Tommy in the background. "I'm calling an ambulance," Emma said, reaching for her phone. "No." Bill struggled to sit up, ignoring the way the room spun around him. "Please, Emma, no hospitals." "Bill, you just collapsed. You need medical attention. I need to tell you something first." Bill managed to get himself into a chair, Emma hovering anxiously beside him. "Kids, come here, please." Sarah and Tommy approached cautiously, Tommy's eyes still wide with fear. Bill took a shaky breath. Knowing that the next few minutes would change everything between them, "I've been keeping something from you," he began. "Something important." Emma's expression grew guarded. "What kind of something?" "I'm sick, Emma. Very sick. I have cancer and—" He paused, seeing the shock register on her face. "The doctors say I don't have very long." The silence that followed was deafening. Tommy moved closer to his mother, not fully understanding but sensing the gravity of the moment. Sarah's face crumpled as the meaning of his words sank in. "How long have you known?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Since Christmas week. I found out the day after I had dinner with you." "The day after?" Emma's eyes widened as she processed this information. "You've known this whole time? While you were helping us, while you were becoming part of our family, you knew you were." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Dying," Bill said gently. "Yes." Emma stood abruptly, pacing to the window, her hands shaking. "The job." "The community center. Oh my God, Bill, what did you do?" This was the moment Bill had been dreading, the moment when Emma would realize that their entire relationship had been built on deception, that the job she'd earned through her own merit was actually purchased with his guilt and desperation. "Emma, please let me explain." "Are you William Harrison?" she asked suddenly, turning from the window. "Harrison Industries, the billionaire who owns half of downtown?" Bill's silence was answer enough. "Oh my God." Emma sank into a chair, her face in her hands. "Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. The job interview, the community center. All of it. You bought it for me. You felt sorry for the poor single mother and decided to play fairy godmother. It wasn't like that. Wasn't it?" Emma's eyes blazed with hurt and anger. "You sat in my kitchen for months, watching me worry about money, watching me cry about possibly losing my children's stability. And you could have solved everything with pocket change." "I wanted to help, but I also wanted it to be real between us," Bill said desperately. "If I'd told you who I was from the beginning, would you have let me into your lives? Would you have seen me as just Bill? Or would I have been another rich man, trying to buy his way into feeling good about himself?" Sarah spoke for the first time since the revelation, her young voice cutting through the tension. "Are you really dying, Mr. Bill?" Bill turned to her, seeing the tears streaming down her face, and felt his heart break all over again. "Yes, sweetheart." "I am." "How long?" she asked, unconsciously echoing the question he'd asked Dr. Chen. "Not very long, maybe a few weeks." Tommy had been listening with the incomplete understanding of an 8-year-old, but now he burst into tears. "I don't want you to die. You're our friend." Bill knelt down despite the pain it caused, pulling the boy into his arms. "I don't want to die either, buddy, but sometimes these things happen and we can't change them." "But why didn't you tell us?" Sarah demanded, her voice breaking. "We could have helped you. We could have taken care of you like you took care of us. Because I wanted the time we had to be about living, not dying." Bill said honestly. "I wanted to be your friend Bill, not the sick man you felt sorry for." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd learned. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but strained. "The community center job, is it real? Am I actually qualified, or was it all an elaborate charity case?" "You're overqualified," Bill said firmly. "Every person who interviewed you said you were exactly what the position needed. Yes, I created the job, but Emma, I created it because this community needs what you can provide. The funding is permanent, established through a foundation that will exist long after I'm gone." "And what about us?" she asked quietly. "What happens to my children when they lose someone else they've learned to love?" Bill had no answer for that question, no way to ease the pain his deception had caused. He'd tried to give them security and ended up giving them another loss to grieve. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I lied to you. But Emma, these past months, they've been the happiest of my life. You and Sarah and Tommy, you saved me from dying alone and bitter. You gave me a family when I thought I'd lost my chance forever." Emma looked at him for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then, to his amazement, she moved to the chair beside him and took his hand. "You ridiculous, stubborn man," she said softly. "Did you really think we cared about your money? Did you think we loved you because you bought groceries and helped with homework? I hope not, but I couldn't be sure. We loved you because you read dinosaur books with the patience of a saint," she said, squeezing his hand. "Because you listened to Sarah's school problems like they were the most important things in the world. Because you looked at my children and saw everything wonderful about them that I see." Bill felt tears he'd been holding back for months finally fall. "I wanted to matter to someone again." "You do matter," Emma said fiercely. "You matter so much that we're going to make every day we have left with you count." Sarah and Tommy moved closer, and suddenly Bill found himself surrounded by the family he'd found in his final months, accepting him not despite his deceptions, but because of the love that had motivated them. It wasn't the ending he'd planned, but it was more grace than he'd ever dared to hope for. The weeks that followed Bill's revelation were unlike anything any of them had experienced. Once the initial shock wore off, the Mitchell family seemed determined to make Bill's remaining time as meaningful as possible. While Bill struggled with the reality of being cared for instead of being the caregiver, Emma took a leave of absence from the community center, which was set to open in 2 weeks, to help Bill manage his pain and decline. She moved into the guest room of his mansion, not because he needed round-the-clock care yet, but because none of them wanted to waste precious time on commutes and logistics. "This house is bigger than our entire mobile home park," Sarah marveled as she explored the numerous rooms. "It's too big," Bill admitted, watching Tommy race through the vast living room with arms outstretched like an airplane. "I always meant to downsize after Margaret died, but I never got around to it." "Tell us about her," Emma said gently. They were sitting in Margaret's sunroom, overlooking the snow-covered gardens that his late wife had designed. Bill's face softened as he began to share memories he'd kept locked away for 5 years. Margaret's laugh, her terrible attempts at cooking fancy dinners, the way she'd read entire novels aloud to him during his business trips so they could discuss them when he came home. "She would have loved you all," he said, watching Sarah help Tommy build a fort out of couch cushions. "She always wanted children, but it just didn't happen for us." "Oh, she got them in the end," Emma said quietly, "just not the way she expected." Dr. Chen began making house calls, helping Bill manage his pain while allowing him to stay in comfortable surroundings. The physician was amazed by the difference in his patient's demeanor. "I've never seen someone face terminal illness with such peace," he told Emma privately. "Whatever you're all doing, it's giving him something medicine can't provide." What they were providing was normalcy mixed with intentional memory-making. Morning pancakes with Tommy's help that always resulted in more batter on the floor than in the pan. Afternoon homework sessions where Sarah worked on algebra while Bill dozed in his chair nearby. Evening story time that now included tales from Bill's business travels and Margaret's adventures as a young teacher. But perhaps most importantly, they were learning to say goodbye in pieces, through small conversations and meaningful moments rather than one devastating final scene. "Mr. Bill," Tommy said one evening as they looked at stars through the mansion's telescope, "when you die, will you become a star?" "I don't know, buddy," Bill said honestly. "What do you think?" "I think you'll become the brightest one, so we can always find you." Bill's throat tightened. "I'd like that very much." Sarah's approach was more practical, but equally heartbreaking. She began writing down everything Bill told them, stories about his childhood, advice he gave her about school, silly jokes he made during dinner. She was creating a record, a way to preserve his voice for Tommy when he was older. "When I have kids someday," she told him one afternoon, "I want to be able to tell them about their grandfather Bill." The title made Bill's breath catch. Grandfather Bill. It was more than he'd ever dreamed of being. Emma's way of coping was to take care of him with the same fierce dedication she'd always shown her children. She researched his condition, learned to manage his medications, and somehow always knew when he needed to rest and when he needed distraction. "You don't have to do this," he told her one particularly difficult morning when the pain had kept him awake all night. "Yes, I do," she said simply. "You're family now. This is what family does." As March progressed and Bill's strength continued to decline, they made decisions together about how to handle the inevitable. Bill's lawyer, Robert, had become a regular visitor, helping to finalize the trust that would provide for the Mitchell family's future. "The community center will be fully funded in perpetuity," Robert explained to Emma. "Your position is guaranteed, with annual increases built in. There's also an education fund for the children, and a separate trust that will provide comfortable living expenses for life." "It's too much," Emma protested, as she had many times before. "It's not enough," Bill corrected from his chair by the fireplace. "It's impossible to repay what you've given me." The night before the community center's grand opening, Bill gathered his chosen family in Margaret's sitting room for a conversation he'd been dreading. "Tomorrow's going to be a big day," he began carefully. "The whole town will be there to celebrate Emma's achievement and the center's opening." "Our achievement," Emma corrected. "This was your dream too. Which is why I need to ask you something difficult," Bill continued. "I want to be there tomorrow, to see you cut the ribbon and watch the community celebrate what you've built. But I also know that my presence might overshadow your moment, especially if people learn about my condition." Sarah looked at him with wise eyes that held too much understanding for a 12-year-old. "You want to say goodbye tomorrow, don't you?" Bill nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. "Then we'll make it the best goodbye ever," Tommy declared, with the certainty that only children possessed. And in that moment, surrounded by the family he'd found in his final months, Bill knew that whatever tomorrow brought, he was ready to face it with grace and gratitude. He'd spent 5 years learning how to be alone. Now, thanks to 3 people who'd seen past his wealth to his heart, he was going to learn how to say goodbye while surrounded by love. The morning of the Millfield Community Center's grand opening dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of bright March sunshine that promised spring was finally coming. Bill woke early, as he had every morning for the past month, but today the pain seemed manageable, as if his body was granting him one last gift of clarity and strength. Emma found him in the kitchen at 6 a.m., fully dressed in his best suit, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and watching the sunrise through the window. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling beside him with her own cup. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he said simply. By 10 o'clock, the entire downtown area around the community center was bustling with activity. Local news crews had arrived to cover the opening of what was being called the most significant community investment in Millfield's history. Mayor Patterson was there, along with city council members and what seemed like half the town's population. Bill arrived separately from the Mitchell family, as they'd planned. He wanted Emma to have her moment of recognition without the distraction of questions about his involvement or condition. From his position near the back of the crowd, he watched with immense pride as Emma stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, radiant with confidence and purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Patterson announced, "it gives me great pleasure to introduce Emma Mitchell, the director of our new Millfield Community Center." The applause was thunderous as Emma stepped forward, holding the oversized scissors. But before she cut the ribbon, she scanned the crowd until her eyes found Bill's. Their gaze held for a moment that seemed to stretch forever, and Bill saw everything he needed to know in her smile. She was going to be fine. They all were. "This center represents more than just programs and services," Emma said into the microphone, her voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "It represents hope, community, and the belief that when we support each other, we can overcome any challenge. As she cut the ribbon and the crowd cheered, Bill felt a hand slip into his. He looked down to see Tommy beside him, having somehow escaped his sister's supervision to find his way through the crowd. "Are you proud of Mom?" Tommy whispered. "So proud," Bill said, his voice thick with emotion. The next few hours passed in a blur of tours, demonstrations and celebrations. Bill mingled quietly with the crowd, accepting congratulations from people who assumed he was just another community supporter. He watched Sarah give enthusiastic tours to other children, explaining the homework, help stations, and computer lab with the expertise of someone who'd helped plan every detail. As the afternoon wore on and the official festivities began to wind down, Bill found himself in the center's main room, surrounded by the three people who had become his world. The crowds had thinned, and the lighting had softened to a warm glow that made everything feel magical. "Mr. Bill," Sarah said, approaching him with something behind her back, "we have something for you." She produced a photo album, clearly handmade, with "Our Friend Bill" written on the cover in her careful handwriting. Inside were pictures from their months together, Bill reading to Tommy, helping with homework, cooking dinner in their tiny kitchen, building snowmen, and dozens of other ordinary moments that had become extraordinary through love. "So you don't forget us," Tommy said seriously. "I could never forget you," Bill whispered. Turning the pages with trembling hands, Emma appeared beside them, holding a small, wrapped package. "This is from all of us," she said. Inside was a watch, simple and elegant, with an inscription on the back. "To Bill, our hearts are always with you. Love, Emma, Sarah, and Tommy." "It's beautiful," Bill said, fastening it around his wrist. "I'll treasure it always." "However long always is," Sarah added quietly, and Bill realized she understood exactly what was happening. As the sun began to set and the community center prepared to close for the evening, the four of them stood together in the main room, surrounded by evidence of dreams made real and love shared freely. "I need you to know something," Bill said, gathering his strength for the words he'd been planning for weeks. "These past few months with you have been the greatest gift of my life. You welcomed a lonely stranger into your family, and you loved me not for what I could give you, but for who I was with you." "Who you are," Emma corrected gently. "Present tense, Bill. Always present tense." "When I'm gone," Bill continued, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes, "I want you to remember that every good thing that comes to you, every success and joy and triumph, you've earned through your own strength and love. The community center, the opportunities it will bring, the lives you'll touch, that's all you, Emma. I just had the privilege of helping make it visible." Tommy moved closer and wrapped his arms around Bill's waist. "I love you, Grandpa Bill." The title that Sarah had mentioned weeks ago, now spoken by Tommy with absolute sincerity, nearly undid Bill's composure completely. "I love you too. All of you, more than I ever knew was possible." Sarah joined the embrace, followed by Emma, and for a moment they stood together in the golden light of the setting sun, streaming through the community center's windows. A family bound not by blood, but by choice and love, and the precious gift of time shared. As they finally prepared to leave, Emma walking slowly beside Bill, while the children ran ahead to the parking lot, she took his arm gently. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For showing us that families come in all shapes and sizes, and that love isn't limited by time or circumstance." She paused, looking at the community center that would stand as a monument to both her dreams and his generosity. "For teaching us that the best gifts aren't the ones you can buy, but the ones you create through caring about each other." That night, as Bill sat in Margaret's reading chair for the last time, looking at the photo album Sarah had made and wearing the watch that would tick away his final hours, He felt something he hadn't experienced since Margaret's death: complete peace. He'd found his way home after all, not to a place, but to the hearts of three people who had shown him that love multiplies when it's shared. That redemption is possible even in final chapters, and that sometimes the most profound gifts come wrapped in the simplest moments. Outside his window, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and Bill smiled, thinking of Tommy's innocent certainty that he would become the brightest one. He closed his eyes, surrounded by love and gratitude, and prepared to find out if 8-year-old boys knew more about the mysteries of life and death than all the doctors and philosophers in the world. His last thought was of Sarah's laugh, Tommy's dinosaur stories, and Emma's fierce, protective love, a trinity of grace that had transformed his ending into the most beautiful beginning he'd never dared to imagine.